Welcome back, guys. We're the Brass Junkies and we're coming back with another video. Again, 3 guns, talking about some differences you might find when purchasing your first firearm.
So today we're going to be going over a little bit the terminology that you might be unfamiliar with. We have here a striker-fired pistol, a hammer-fired, then we're going to get into a little bit what double action is and what single action is and what is the difference between the two. We have a 1911. This one's actually chambered in 22, so it's not true 1911, but for the video's sake we're going to call it a 1911. So, single action, what that means is basically in order for a gun to go off, there are 2 actions that need to take place. 1 is the hammer needs to be pulled back, and 2, that hammer needs to be released, striking the firing pin, which will ignite the primer and send the round out. So, older guns, and guns like the 1911, they are only capable of performing one of these functions. They're single action, meaning that you can pull the trigger, but it's not going to go off until you help the gun. You have to do that first action. You have to rack it back, cock that hammer back, at which point the second action can be performed by the gun, causing that round to go off.
Alright, now that we talked a little bit about the single action only firearms, we're still going to talk about a hammer-fired gun, but this time it's double action. So like we talked about already, when you pull the trigger of a single action, nothing will happen. You need to manually pull the hammer back, and then as you release the trigger, the hammer will slide forward, firing a round. Now this gun, this is a double action, which means not only can you pull the hammer back and then fire it like you were shown, but you can also hold the trigger and pull it, and it performs that double action like we were talking about. You pull the trigger all the way, it then releases the hammer all the way forward. So you'll see the first action, it pulls the hammer back, and then as you keep pulling the trigger, bam, and it fires it. So 2 full actions performed in 1 full trigger pull. Okay, so now that we know that a full trigger pull will not only pull the hammer back, but then will release the hammer. That's good to know, so when your hammer is down, it is always in a firing position. The 1911, if the hammer was down, it's unable to shoot. But with this one, no matter if the hammer is forward or if the hammer is back, you can always fire a round. Now, an important thing to note is that your first round will be either single action or a full double action. But every round after that, so let's say you're in a double action and you pull it and fire a round off, it'll rack the slide to a point where the hammer will actually stay back. Meaning that your first round, while it may be double action, every round after that will stay single action, right? So first round, double action, it racks the slide, still single action now.
Awesome, so now that we've gone over what the difference is between single and double action and what those are, we're going to get into the difference between a hammer-fired and a striker-fired pistol. So as you can see with this Beretta, this is the Beretta 92A1, we have what's called a hammer, hence the name hammer-fired. So, with the hammer-fireds, this hammer right here, as it flings forward with the trigger pull, strikes the firing pin, which then strikes the primer, igniting the round and sending it out of the gun. So this is what we refer to as hammer-fired. Newer, more modern pistols, however, like the Glock, are known as striker-fired. As you can see, they do not have an external hammer. They don't actually have a hammer at all. So what this is, you rack a round just like in a hammer-fired. However, what happens when you rack that round is it pulls the striker back inside of the gun, and then when you pull the trigger, that internal striker is going to fly forward with that firing pin and hit the round, causing it to go off. So you don't have the hammer, everything's internal, meaning that nothing's going to be able to block or obstruct this hammer from striking, because if the hammer is unable to strike the firing pin, it's not going to go off. In the case of a striker-fired, however, there's no way for you to possibly obstruct that.
Alright, now getting into the pros and cons of a hammer-fired or a striker-fired, there really aren't many. It's more personal preference, and we really suggest you go to a local gun shop, maybe hold them, see what you like more, which one fits you, because it's different for everyone. But one thing we would like to mention is that with a hammer-fired firearm, obviously there's an external hammer that can get caught on close, and especially when dropped, can hit the ground pretty hard. In fact, they've been known to actually release and then fire a round unexpectedly, and that can be dangerous. On a striker-fired, however, everything's internal, right? You can't see the hammer here, meaning they're a lot more drop safe. So in case of an accident, the striker-fired would be a lot less likely to go off. Alright, so that's going to about do it for us today. If you guys would like to see a video talking a little bit more in depth about how a gun works and how you can manipulate it, please drop a comment, let us know.
Awesome. If you guys have anything else that you want to see, any questions you want answered, feel free to leave a comment down below. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you next week on Brass Junkies.